What's happening, Captains? It's me, truly the dumbest. And today, I have a bit of a video that I'm sure no one expected. I will be addressing, of course, if you've seen the title, the thumbnail, and all of the above, I want to be talking about the Skull Merchant and changes that I think would be good for her to release with, or for them to do before they release her. You get the gist of it. Everybody's made videos about this so far. Skull Merchant, huge disappointment, or just keeping it real. Nobody's really happy with her. Although I'm going to be honest, I have not played her yet. I am a console player, so I do not have access to the PTB. So most of this, or all of these all these changes will be based off secondhand accounts, me watching videos of gameplay, me watching other people's opinions, all that stuff. Basically everything that I can do to base an opinion off of something without actually without actually involving myself with it. So, all that being said though, these are, of course, my personal opinion, which is above all and correct in every way, shape, and form, and if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Nonetheless, though, I don't really have much to say to build this up, so I kind of just want to get into it. But before I do that, I want to quickly apologize. My videos have been released in a day late, as of late, past couple of weeks. I apologize for that. I've had a busy couple of weeks, but I hope to get back on my upload schedule starting next week. But if I continue to upload on Sundays, then I would just, assume that my new upload schedule is on Sundays. I have been thinking about the idea. I'm not too sure, though, if I'm going to stick with it or not. Nonetheless, though, that's not really important. What is important is the Skull Merchant and why I think she's a disappointment. Anyway, let's get into this. Gonna be such a positive video, isn't it? Alright, before I start, I just want to say, if I end up using Skull Merchant gameplay for this video, it will obviously not be mine. So I will be leaving the video link and the channel link of the gameplay I stole from in the top of the description below. If I feel like a good guy, if I feel like a bad guy, though, I'll put it at the bottom of the description or in the comments. All right. Well, jokes aside, I'm gonna jump straight into the changes now. Starting off, I think the what's her name? The Skull Merchant should start off with 5 drones instead of 4. Now, I feel like 4 is enough to hold down a 3-gen, of course, as most people have already discovered, but it's not really enough to use the drones effectively in chase. I feel like with 5 drones, you'll be able to not only spread more pressure in just active gameplay, but you also spread pressure in chase. And I think that what should be focused on with this kit is its chase viability rather than 3-gen viability, because nobody likes a 3-gen area or a 3-gen killer. I mean, no matter what, though, you're gonna force a 3-gen with this killer at some point. It's gonna happen, no matter if you want to do it or not, which is just an unfortunate aspect of the game rather than the power itself. But I feel like 5 drones would more incentivize a more active chase-based playstyle. Also, maybe will push people to place drones more in like active survivor areas that aren't generator involved. Like, say, for example, in let's go. Fractured Cowshed. I was trying to think of Groaning Storehouse, but now that so Fractured Cowshed, there's areas that are super populated by survivors that aren't really populated by gens, and I feel like giving the killer more drones, it'll incentivize people to throw drones in more of those survivor active areas rather than the gen active areas. Of course, like I said, you're still going to get still going to get 3 gens. You're still going to be able to place them on gens aggressively, but unfortunately, nothing you can do about that. So, moving on. To the now specific drone aspect of the power. First, with starting off with this active mode, and if you're wondering why everything is labeled so weirdly, it's because I stole it all I stole like the listing and the labeling from DBD Wiki, so that's why. It's their thing, not mine. But starting off with the active mode of the drones, I think the boot up sequence should be increased or decreased from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. 4 seconds is an absurdly long time. Everybody knows that. I think 2 seconds will be able to keep it fast. Fast and keeping it actually available in chase without making it too strong, because 4 seconds you place that down and the survivor's already gone by the time it's booted up, right? So with 2 seconds, it'll be able to actually have a presence within the chase or within the specific loop you're trying to place it at without something. My mind drew blank just now, but nonetheless, you get the point of it. It's meant to make the drone more active in chase. It's meant to make it more viable for a quick, maybe quick loop shutdown rather than like a 4 second, forever. Nonetheless, though, I feel like it's short enough to be effective without being too strong. You can even probably go with 1 second for this, and it'd still be not strong, or it'd still be perfectly fine. I think 2 seconds is just a good in between. So, 2 seconds. That's my opinion. Moving on to my second change for the active mode on drones, I think the detection zone should not be available or not be visible to survivors until they enter its radius. Now, the whole until it enter its radius thing was an idea that from Scott Jund. Of course, if you watch him, you know that. I like the idea. I think it's a good idea indeed. It also, it keeps, as he said, or somewhere around what he said. I don't remember because I haven't watched the video in a few hours. But it keeps the drones viable without keeping them too strong. You go in, you don't know if you're in the zone, and then you see then the zone pops up as you're entering it. So you're like, okay, now I can go avoid that area. I think it just works as an idea, despite the fact that I'm terrible at explaining things and articulating my thoughts. I think it works, and I think it would once again be one of those things where it's a good change that won't be too strong, but will help keep the power or make the power more effective. So moving on. I think that it should grant oblivious rather than undetectable when a survivor enters a drone after a couple seconds. Of course, there's another change that Scott mentioned. A couple of these changes I stole from Scott because they're good changes. And I think this is one of his best, or one of the smartest ones. Somewhere, once again, around as he said, that I agree with. If the survivors entering the zone, if they become oblivious, it makes a lot more sense. It gives a lot more actual stealth, because with the current drone system, you have the killer, you hear the tear radius, and then it enters the drone state. You can't hear the tear radius, and then the survivor's like, okay, she's nearby, let's dip. Now, instead of that, you have no idea. So they can be coming from anywhere, and you actually get genuine sneak attacks rather than, okay, she's here, let's run, but you don't know where you're going to run to safely. I think in the after 2 seconds thing, I think it makes it a bit more, I guess, less annoying for survivors, because if you just walk in and out, it just goes blah, 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 blah. I feel like it'd be really annoying. So the 2 second thing, again, this is one of those things you can probably drop to 1 second as well. Really just, in between what I think would be a good timer. I think, or having no timer is annoying. Having 2 might be too long. I don't know. Of course, these are all just changes on paper. For all we know, these could be all too strong or too weak in actual gameplay. Nonetheless, though, that's my change for that one. Or I guess Scott's change that I stole. Moving on to the next one, though. I think the drone range should be increased to 14 meters instead of 10. I was thinking 18 meters for the thing. Not 16 meters. So it's half of the tear radius of the killer herself. But I think 14 makes more sense. It keeps it big while not being too big, and I feel like 16 would be a bit too big. Once again, maybe 14 is still too small. Maybe 16 is perfectly fine. This is one of those things that you don't really get to see until you're doing it in gameplay. But nonetheless, I think 14 is an ideal minimum, with maybe 18 is an ideal maximum. Not a whole lot to add on that one though. Just make a bigger radius so it's more you get the whole thing, make it more effective and all that stuff. But that's all the changes I have for the active mode. Moving on to the scouting mode of the drone. I think that the drone should be able to be placed right outside of other drone areas. At the moment, you have to place it in a way so both radiuses don't touch. So it's like you have the drone, you have its radius, and then you have like a 5 feet gap or something until you can, or not even a 5 feet gap, it's like a 20 feet, but with a 5 feet gap in between the edge of each zones. I think that's ridiculous. There's no, like, what is overlaying the thing going to do? Oh no, it's even more annoying to see, or something like that. I think that's a dumb restriction. I think you should just be able to place drones just directly outside the radius of another drone. I mean, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. That what does overlaying the drones do? Is there a specific thing in the code that overlaying drone radiuses make it go twice as fast? Because why would you do that? That's ridiculous. If you don't want that, then to just remove it. I get having the drones have a certain amount of space, so that's why I think they should be able to place on outside of each other's radiuses. So you can make a conga line rather than a gap. I said that weirdly, I think, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. You see it on screen. Anyway, moving on to my second change for the scouting mode. I think survivors caught by the drone should be immediately given a claw trap. Now, this one is one of those changes that might be too strong, in gameplay, but I feel like the claw trap doesn't have as much of a presence in current gameplay. The claw trap's a very interesting idea with the whole tracking using Mr. Radar, which I'll get into in a minute. But I feel like its presence in gameplay isn't active enough. You don't really get the claw trap a whole lot as Survivor through my watching of gameplay. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like if survivors that were found were given a claw trap, it would make the claw trap more of an active presence. It'd make getting caught by drones a lot more of a threat than it is at the moment. And I think I think overall it just make the game a lot more active and a lot easier for the killer, because at the moment claw traps aren't really the most useful thing in the world, especially considering that the fact that survivors can see when they're being tracked. Once again, I'll get to in a minute. Maybe did I put that down? We'll see. But yeah, that's really it. Just I think survivors should be given claw traps if they're caught by drones. So moving on, this is another one I stole from Scott. I think drones should reveal totems, boons, and items on the ground. This absolutely makes sense to me. You know, it's a thing where it's like, this killer is supposed to be a millionaire with drones that can scan everything in its environment. It makes complete sense that it reveals totems and boons and items, right? I mean, like finding totems or items on the ground isn't really that strong of a feature. You can't really do shit with totems or the items besides like, ooh, that's good to know. Boons may be a bit stronger, but at the same time, I hate the ever-living fuck out of boons, so I don't care if it's too strong. They should just, remove Circle of Healing. That'd be better, I mean, I'd take that. If it came down to making this killer stronger or removing Circle of Healing, I would rather them remove Circle of Healing. I'm going to be flat out honest. Everybody who's been a part of my channel knows how much I hate that perk. I'm not going to get into that, though. But yeah, so that's that. I think that'd be fair. And if not, they can make it an add-on, which I'll get into later. I'm out of foreshadowing. I'm so good at this. Anyway, that's all my changes for the scouting mode of drones, though. So I'm going to move on to the lock-on system of drones. Very simple change. I think they should cut down the time it takes for a drone to fully lock onto a survivor from 10 seconds to 7 seconds. Now, I also think 5 seconds could work. Of course, as I've said so far many times, 7 seconds is kind of an in-between. What I think would be a maximum and a minimum. The maximum, 10 at the moment, I think is too long, and the minimum 5, I think is just the perfect cutoff. So I think 7 is good in between. Again, this is one of those things you'd have to test in actual game rather than having, it on paper, because you're never really sure how strong it could be until you see it, in game. Nonetheless, though, I think that something in between 7 to 5 seconds is a good time difference, or a good time to get locked on rather than 10 seconds. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for that. That was really the only problem I had with locking on when it came to survivors. So we're going to move on to Mr. Radar. Now, Mr. Radar, or I guess I forgot what they called it already, the radar reader or something like that. I don't care. I'm making my Spaceballs reference. Now, Mr. Radar, I don't know what I was about to say. So moving on to Mr. Radar, with my first change, I think survivors should no longer be notified that they're being scouted by Mr. Radar. That's ridiculous. Why are we giving survivors so much information on the killer's power? Like, they've been doing this so much. Like, the survivors can see how much condemned they have with Sadako. They see the guard's radius. They see the guard's patrol path with the night. What else? What other things have they done? I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's a lot of examples of this, and especially recently. If my brain can function at the moment, I'm sure I could pull more examples. But those are the two biggest ones, are Sadako and the Night. They can keep on giving survivors too much information that they should not be having. And I think that the fact they're being scouted by Mr. Radar is one of those things that they should not know that's happening. Like, that's so ridiculous. That removes like 50% of the intention with this power. If you're trying to make her an all-seeing, like, ambush killer, you're removing the ambush aspect of it. And in a way, you're removing the all-seeing, or at least hindering it, by allowing survivors to see that you're all-seeing, right? Like, they already know they're being tracked with the claw trap. I mean, there's no need to let them know exactly when they're being tracked. They can just assume that they're being tracked and play either more risky or less risky depending on, how they're feeling in the moment. I don't understand why behavior continues to give survivors too much information. This is also, of course, leaked into their perk design with disillusion. Please remove it, man. But this is, of course, this is a problem that they have as a whole that they need to get over. But I think this is the first good step into that direction, is removing the notification that you're being stalked. Now moving on to my second change, because that one's pretty self-explanatory. I think exposed survivors should appear red on Mr. Radar. I mean, not really a should change. This is like just a nice quality of life change that you can make, so you can track survivors easier. So if a survivor plays it really risky or dumb and they get exposed and then they disable a drone, or if they just get caught and they become exposed because of that, you can track them very easily and actually capitalize on the fact that the survivor is exposed. Most killers that have something like, or have exposed or insta kills, like let's say Sadako or something. Actually, not Sadako. Sadako has more than enough viability. There are a lot of killers out there, especially with M1 killers, that don't really work well with exposed because of the fact they're not able to capitalize well enough. I feel like this killer is one of those things at the moment, and if they were able to see which survivor was exposed, it would allow them to far more easily weed them out and kill them, or actually capitalize on the exposed status. Of course, this would only work with claw traps, so it still requires some sort of, counterplay. It still gives counterplay on the survivor's part. If they keep the claw traps off them, then they won't have to worry about being tracked while exposed, or targeted specifically while exposed. The change makes sense to me. I hope I'm explaining it well enough. But that's really it. I just think that exposed survivors should be red on Mr. Radar. Moving on to my next change with Mr. Radar, I think scanner radius should vary on tear radius, size, and position with a minimum of 32 meters. Now this one's a bit of a more interesting, I don't really see happening changes. But I feel like it'd be a lot more interesting with, say if you stacked on agitation, monitor, and max furtive chase for whatever reason. So your radar would be able to read a lot bigger radius. Because I believe at the moment radar caps out at 32 meters. And I think it'd be cool if you could have like a 60 meter tear radius and be able to track for 60 meters. It'd be strong as hell and probably a super niche change. But I feel like not only would it give a lot more perk variability with the killer, it'd also make it just a bit more interesting to mess around with, right? I feel like it's not too strong while also, or hopefully not too strong, while also being just more fun and interesting and giving them, more variety when it comes to perk choice. Nothing super complicated there, so I'm going to move on to the final change of Mr. Radar. I think the Skull Merchant should no longer be slowed while checking Mr. Radar. This is such an obvious change it's such an obvious thing, like, why does it slow you down? Deploying drones doesn't slow you down. I don't see why pulling out Mr. Radar should slow you down. Maybe that's just me. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not. It's everybody. But I just feel like it's a no-brainer change that should happen indefinitely, no matter what. I don't see why they shouldn't do it. So, nothing real else to add. Moving on, though, to hacking a drone and claw traps. I think first, out of all these changes, why did I have two separate sections for claw traps? That's weird. Ignore that. So let's just go to hacking a drone. Oh no, this is hacking the thing. Okay, so hacks specifically. I apologize for my misstep there. But for hacking, I think successful hacks should disable drones for 7 seconds rather than 10. That might not make sense, but right now with drones, when you hack them, they're disabled entirely, or they cannot return to the Skull Merchant for another 10 seconds. I think that's a bit long. Once again, like the other thing I mentioned, the lock-on time, and of course 7. I already explained all the middle value. I think 5 seconds could also work. Blah blah blah. I just think that removing an entire drone for 10 seconds is really hard for a killer like this. That's like removing a nurse blink for 10 seconds. It would be absolutely detrimental. So I think lowering that timer, I think keeping the timer is fine, but lowering the timer significantly would be a lot more healthier. I think even with this one, you can drop it down to like 3 seconds or something. Find a good in between, as I've said already. That won't be too strong, but also won't be too weak. But yeah, essentially that's it. Just lower the time the drones are disabled when they get hacked. For claw traps, I believe this is one. Yes. A failed hack gives survivor claw traps and grants the survivor with the exposed status effect for 30 seconds. I believe failing a hack of the drone just reactivates it or something like that. I think it should be a lot more detrimental. I should implore you to focus more and actually like take it seriously. I think the only time this shouldn't count is when the killer or interrupts a hack, in which I don't really see why they should be exposed for that or given a claw trap. Doesn't make sense. Nonetheless, though, I think a failed hack should give survivors claw traps and then also expose them for 30 seconds. Yeah, that's really it. I mean, it's pretty complicated when you read it out loud, but it's not super complicated to explain. So we're going to move on from that then to actual claw traps. First change, I think when granted claw traps, the survivors have the ability to remove one battery with the active ability button. Now this one's a nerf to claw traps. This is, I think this, I'm going to be honest, I don't really think this is, I forgot. I don't think I mentioned this at the start of the video, but I don't think all of these changes need to happen for the killer. I think in this case, a lot of these changes, a majority of them should happen. But whenever I make videos like this, I don't expect or really think that all of them need to happen for the killer. I think some of them would be good. I think most of them would be good, but I usually don't expect all of them to happen. This is one of those ones, it gives you a bit more counterplay to the claw traps, especially with all the buffs that I'm giving to claw traps in general. I think giving survivors the ability to shorten that timer with like a quick skill check or a quick, whatever it's called, the little keypad thing, I think that would help immensely. Or not immensely, maybe immensely, yeah. I think it would help immensely with keeping claw traps, or keeping the, I guess, counter ability of claw traps while keeping them strong with all these changes that I'm giving them. So that's really that. Nothing too special there, but, moving on. I also think that failing to remove a claw trap, failing to remove a claw trap, I think should reset its battery and grant the exposed status effect for 20 seconds. I feel like 20 seconds is a bit long now that I'm reading it. I'm going to change this live. I think 15 seconds or 15 or 10 seconds of exposed, I think should be fine. It gives enough time for the skull merchant, or for the killer, if they're being vigilant enough, they can capitalize on it, but short enough to the point where it's like, if they don't capitalize on the exposed immediately, it will, it'll just dissipate and you won't be able to get any value out of it. Nonetheless, though, a bit of a interesting change, a change that once again I don't think really needs to happen, and one that I think could possibly be too strong depending on how long you make the exposed stats for. So yeah, that's really it for all the power changes. If I have anything that I would like to add, I will do it in post. But for now, that's all the changes I have. I'll put up the list that I have here if you guys want to take a pause and read it. Yeah, I'm gonna move straight on to perks now, because that's what I have next. That wasn't super awkward. Alright, so moving on to the perks. Man, I gotta say though, just before I get into it, the perks in this chapter are really disappointing. I mean, they're not bad, they're all very meh, but they're all boring. There's nothing really super standoutish about this, so, nothing a whole lot to add to the perks at the moment, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. Starting off, oh yeah, one more thing. This will be perks and add-ons, because I don't have a lot of thoughts on the perks as a whole. But starting off with thwack. Now, I think a pretty obvious change, in my opinion, for thwack is removing the activation window, so the 75 seconds, and also removing the hooking survivor action. Hooking a survivor just by default gives you very limited amount of usage. It's a very limited resource due to the fact that you only have 12 of it. And then stacking on top of that, of the pallets being a very limited resource, it kind of gets into that ruin situation where you have two limitations that are both unnecessary, or having them both together at the same time are both unnecessary. So I think only one or the other really needs to happen, or really needs to be a thing. In this case, I don't think either should be a thing though. Wait, no. Wait, I lost track. What am I talking about? I was talking about Rune, my bad. For this perk, for Thwack though, I think that having the activation window and hooking survivor action stack on top of the fact that you are limited in your resources with pallets and breakable walls is it weakens the perk heavily in a way that it really should not be weakened. I think removing the activation window and the hooking survivor will allow the perk to be more active throughout the course of the game while also keeping the limited resources, lowering the amount of limitations when it comes to resources of the perk. So instead of having it 12 times, you can have it upwards to 26 times because, the game. Nonetheless, though, not super big change. I just think that it just makes more sense. But since the activation window was Baver's whole perk tier thing, I think they should reveal ores for 4, 5, 6 seconds. For whatever reason, they insist on having perk tiers in the game still. I think 4, 5, 6 seconds, just to satisfy that hunger. I mean, if not, you can also go with 2, 3, 4 seconds, since the maximum right now is 4 seconds, but this is about buffing it, not nerfing it, so it's a fine buff. Moving on to leverage, I really think only one change needs to happen, and I think that removing that 30-second window that you have for the perk to be active is really the only thing you need to do to make this perk much better than it is now. Definitely one of the weirder perk limitations I've seen in a while. Not as weird as this Disillusion though. I'll never stop bringing that up until it's changed. Yeah, I think removing the 30-second window keeps the perk active throughout the trial. Considering the fact that this is technically more of an end game perk rather than like a mid game perk, of course, the 30-second window seems unnecessary. I feel like stacking it up over time will keep the perk very strong while also keeping it, available at all times. Maybe that made sense, maybe that didn't. All I know is that we're moving on to the next one, which is a game of foot. Now, first, I think, which would be the most obvious change out of all these perk changes, is removing the M1 limitation when it comes to damaging the specific survivor. I think damaging a survivor at all should activate the perk, as we've seen with perks such as Dark Devotion. Giving it a M1 specific activation really hampers the usability of the perk. But even then, Dark Devotion is still pretty weak because they did not buff any other aspect, unlike my change on this perk. Oh, that's such a good transition. Where I think they should give a 7% haste increase rather than right now the 5%. 5% isn't terrible in Chase, but it's pretty terrible anywhere else. I think 7% would help it while not in Chase, while also keeping it fairly balanced in Chase. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 7 seconds is too much. Maybe 5 seconds is the perfect amount. Of course, as I've said 1,000 times by this point, one of those changes you really can't know until you've used it in gameplay. But I think 7% might be a better, more effective change rather than 5%. On top of that, I also think that they should increase the duration that the haste is active from 8, 9, 10 seconds to 8, 10, 12, giving you more availability with the perk, considering that it's like the activation and limitations of the perk are very specific. I think giving it a bigger window would give it more power while it's active. It also makes a much bigger difference in Chase and all that aspect shiz whatever. Nonetheless, I think 8, 10, 12 is strong while staying not overpowered. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for the perks. So I'm going to move on to the add-ons. Before I do that, here's all the perk changes I have, just for a couple seconds. Now we're going to move on to the add-ons. Now, in all honesty, I think most of the add-ons on the Skull Merchant are very good. They are very unique, actually diverse add-ons that I very much enjoy. I think like the last killer to have such like fun add-ons, in my opinion, was the Drench. And it seems like that whole anniversary like chapter area gives us some of the best additions to the game when it comes to add-ons. That didn't make any sense. No, it doesn't. What it does do, though, is nothing important to what I'm talking about. So I'm going to move on from that horrible analogy. So moving on to the first. That being said, though, I still think some changes can happen to make more of the add-ons more effective and more viable. Starting off with shotgun speakers. I think that this one should only affect survivors with claw traps rather than just in drone radius as a whole. This one is a nerf to start off, which is, which is something I'm sure no one. I'm sure something of us nobody saw coming, right? I can't speak. I'm tired. At the moment, or what it does right now though is it suppresses the sound of warning skill checks when inside the area of effect of a drone. I think this, while stacking it on top of the Addy Valiente issue 1, which reduces the skill check size by 20% while in drone radius, I think stacking on top of each other is very strong and oppressive combination. So I think making it just claw trap related will keep it strong, but it'll also keep it from being too oppressive when combined with the other add-on. So moving on to my second change, shotgun loose screw, which I believe, where is loose screw? There it is. Sorry, I lost loose screw. Loose screw at the second, at the moment it applies the exhaustive status effect when entering the area effect of a drone, and this effect would linger for 3 seconds. I think that they could easily linger for 10 seconds, maybe 5, maybe 10's a bit too long, but I think a small buff, considering this is in fact a green add-on, not like a yellow or something, I think it could be increased by quite a bit without, actually it'd be super oppressive, but it's a green add-on. Green add-ons, in my opinion, should be very oppressive while being simple. So I think a 10-second activation or a 10-second linger rather than a 3-second will make it a lot stronger and will make it a lot more viable of an add-on to use. Not a whole lot to add there. So I'm going to move on to infrared upgrade. Now, infrared upgrade at the moment, if I can find it for the life, there it is. It makes it so after removing a claw trap, the survivor's aura is revealed to you for 4 seconds. I buffed this up to 5 seconds, mainly because I can have that even numeral, just so it get that clean 5-second thing. What's it called? My brain is not working right now. When 5, 10, 15, 20, it keeps it that while also giving a slight buff. It's also a green add-on, so I feel like 5 seconds makes more sense to me visually wise, looking at it, reading it. I don't have a good excuse for this one. I just think it'd be funny if it was fun, or not funny. If I just think it's better looking if it's 5 seconds over 4. So moving on to a change I can actually back up. Randomized strobes. At the moment, randomized strobes. Survivors entering the area of effect will suffer from a 5% hindered status effect for 3 seconds. This one, I have it hindered, so hindered status lasts for the duration the survivors are in the drone's active zone. At the moment, it happens for 3 seconds when entering, and then it dissipates after 3 seconds. Unless it's worded poorly, but if it isn't worded poorly and it's just bad, I think it should just last throughout the drone's radius, and then lingers for 5 seconds when leaving. Considering this is a purple add-on, I think it's not oppressive enough and it's not strong enough, so lingers for 5 seconds. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So it lasts long. So it lingers when you leave, and it lasts for the amount of time the survivor's in the drone radius. That's pretty much it. Honestly, fairly simple change. I think it's stronger as a purple add-on. It should be a lot stronger than it is now. And I think it's still not too strong, as most of these changes are meant to buff the killer without making her too strong. So moving on to geographical readout, I think it should grant just a 4% haste rather than a 2% haste. At the moment, it gives you a haste status effect when you enter the drone's area of effect. And I think that 2% is super weak. That's weak sauce. I think 4% is a lot more fair, with, once again, try not to keep it too strong. I think 3% could also work. And maybe even a 5% could work. But that might be a bit pushing it. So once again, not a super complicated, strong change. So I'm going to move on to one of the more complicated changes: expired batteries. Now, first, I decided to swap this and prototype rotor. So this will now be an ultra rarity, and I think for the first change, claw traps should no longer be destroyed upon losing all battery life. Now, at the moment, what the batteries does, all survivors start the trial with the claw trap. It extends the battery life of that claw trap by 150%, and the claw trap does not recharge and will automatically remove the battery once, or will automatically be destroyed when it dies. I think that add-ons that only affect the start of a game are bad, which is why I don't like Amanda's letter. But I think that if they were to change this to where the claw traps don't die and you still have to remove them normally, it'll keep the claw traps a bit more viable rather than, just kind of killing it off right there and then, which is honestly a thing that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, on top of that, I think it should increase the battery life of all claw traps by 75%, which is why I gave the ultra rare add-on. This is unlike the other add-ons. This is a much stronger add-on, and is way too strong to be in the ultra rare rarity with the changes that I've imposed, which is why I think it should be moved on to the very rare or ultra rare, and not the very rare. So from purple to red, in case anybody was confused. But yeah, basically just extends the battery life of all claw traps significantly and does not kill the opening game's claw traps. You have to still remove them normally as survivor. So moving on to advanced movement prediction. This one's a pretty decently sized change. At the moment, what it does, survivors have their aura active for 6 seconds upon entering the active drone zone. I'm going to call it the bone zone. I'm definitely going to do that. I have it changed so survivors that enter a drone's active zone have their aura revealed for the duration of the time that they're in the zone. So once they enter, their aura is readable. Once they leave, it's gone immediately. And on top of that, I also think that it should reveal the aura of pallets and windows that are in the drone's active radius, just to give it a bit more, make it a bit more oppressive, or not oppressive, but give it a more viability. So it kind of stacks on top of that whole boon totem thing. This is a change that I also stole from Scott, by the way. I stole quite a bit of changes from Scott, as I'm sure you could tell. He had this as base kit. I think this would be better as an add-on, because you still got I think windows and pallets are very integral to chase. So having it just base kit would be too strong in my opinion, unlike the totems and the items. But with this, I think it makes sense considering you also got the survivor reading, aura reading, so you're able to just track everything in the loop. Maybe that'd be too strong though, now that I think about it. I'm going to say it isn't though, because I like the idea of this add-on. So moving on to Prototype Rotor, which, as I said earlier, changed to very rare rarity rather than an ultra rare rarity. Now, at the moment, what it does, you gain a 5% haste when entering the drone's active zone, and this does not stack and it also triggers once per drone, and the effect is lost when hitting a survivor. This is pointless. I hate this add-on in every way, shape, and form. It's stupid, and it's super weird. The fact that it does not stack with anything, it only triggers once per drone, and this is super weird. On top of the fact that geographical readout, to my knowledge, basically does the same thing that this does, but slightly weaker. So considering I buffed that up to a 4% rather than a 2%, I decided to change this entirely. Now, instead of that, I have activating a drone causes every survivor with a claw trap to scream, hindering them by 5% for 30 seconds. And on top of that, any survivor within the radius of a drone being active without a claw trap will automatically grant them a claw trap. So basically, with survivors' claw traps, when a drone activates, they'll scream, and then they'll be hindered. Survivors without claw traps, if they're in the radius within the active drone, and they do not, or not even active, if they're in the radius of the drone and it's not active, they will automatically be granted a claw trap. They will not scream or be hindered, however. They'll just be granted a claw trap. I feel like this is a lot more interesting than the current Prototype Rotor, but also, once again, not being strong enough to be an iridescent. That's why I switched them once again. I feel like this would be a lot more fun to use though. And I don't think this should be too strong. I think it should be pretty balanced. Maybe it's a bit too strong. Maybe the hinder could be lowered a bit, or maybe it could be dropped entirely. I don't know. Once again, something you'd have to see in gameplay. But with that being said, that's really all for that add-on. I want to move on to iridescent unpublished manuscript. Whenever a drone is active by any means, a survivor, that drone gains a 32-meter tear radius for 15 seconds. This effect can apply to any amount of drones at a time, and it previously only activated on manually, or it only occurred on manually activated drones. So right now, you activate a drone, it gains a tear radius for 15 seconds. I think if a drone gets activated by any means, it gains a tear radius. I think that'll make it a lot more impressive. It makes it actually seem like more of an iridescent rather than a purple. And on top of that, it decreases the number of drones by one. At the moment, or putting that on top of my change, it would be 4 drones with this add-on rather than the 5. If this was to go in without the drone edition, it'd be 3 instead of 4. I don't see this add-on being too strong as an iridescent. I see it being like a more mid-tier iridescent, even with these changes. But at the same time, I think giving it 5 drones with this much, or with this much versatility, or this much like possible pressure, might be a bit too much. I mean, at the same time, I think you could totally remove 2 drones and it'd still be a very effective add-on. But I think at the same time, 4 is perfectly fine. Maybe once again, I could be wrong. I'm just truly the dumbest here. I'm just sitting on a chair reading things that I come up with, saying that's the best around. So, you know, for all I know, maybe it's not strong enough or whatever I was just saying. I've already lost my train of thought. I am a goldfish, and in mind, body, and spirit. All right, well, that's all for my changes. I'll have them all listed here once again. And while I linger on my poor life choices and my speech impediments, I'm going to move on to the ending, the outro of the video. So I'm just, I'm going to jump straight into it since, you've had time to read all this now. Bye-bye. All right. We've reached the end now, to the end of another disjointed, delayed video, as I am so prone to putting out in all my greatness. I should stop saying things that come to my head. I should really be writing this stuff down. Nonetheless, though, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys understood a lick of what I said, because honestly, I don't even understand what I said by this point. My brain is so, crumbled and disjointed, and, it's like my brain by this point is like a series of pool noodles that have been broken and glued back together, but improperly and in the wrong places. So nothing I say makes sense to me anymore. If it makes sense to you, why not consider liking and subscribing, because that would help me quite a bit. And if you have any comments on my changes, or you have any other changes you think would be nice, why not comment them down below? Let me know. We can talk about it in the comments, because of course I'm open to conversation. I have no friends and no life outside of Dead by Daylight, so any interaction with people would be nice. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'll be to sing.